You're listening to Freight Famous, presented by Rose Rocket, bringing you the people that make trucking move. From behind the scenes into the limelight. Here's your host, Justin Bailie.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Freight Famous, a podcast produced by Rose Rocket. New episodes of Freight Famous will be released about twice a month. On this podcast, we talk with guests about how they build, scale, and automate their trucking business. If you have a trucking business or transportation business, you might be looking for trucking or transportation software, or you might know someone who is looking for trucking or transportation software. I've got some good news. We've got free money. That's right, free money, all through our incentivized referral program. To learn more, email us at referralpartners@roserocket.com, and a member of our team will be in touch. I'm your host, Justin Bailie, co-founder at Rose Rocket. Today's topic is a super important conversation. January is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. So we have a very special guest today, and I'm excited to introduce you to Heather Fry. So Heather is the Director of Industry Training at Truckers Against Trafficking. And so talking to her today, I learned about what human trafficking is. Interestingly, how truckers can help prevent it in ways that I actually did not think. I had a very different idea on their role in preventing this. She tells I would go as far as to say a pretty horrific story that has a happy ending around how a trucker specifically called out and was able to and get some people put in jail for a very long period of time for running a human trafficking situation. There's a whole bunch of stuff here, how you can get involved. It's such a small amount of effort I learned to really get educated on how you can make a difference, like a real lasting difference. And I really think this is a very important show to listen to front to back, just to make sure you really, really understand what you can do. Again, I think that the effort is small and I think the outcome can be significant. So for those with, mothers, daughters, aunts, sisters, you want to hear this. Hi, Heather. Nice to have you.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Justin.
So this is a pretty serious topic today, and it's strange for me to say that I was looking forward to this conversation, I think, but I am, because this is something I don't know a lot about, and I think it's something that is obviously very important to raise awareness around. So I'm really excited about the show today. To be honest, I've been looking forward to this one just to better understand. Just bringing to light what human trafficking is and how it's affecting people and how it affects all of us. And again, I don't have a lot of information on this. So I really probably just want to start with, how did you get here? How did you end up how are you, sitting where you are right now talking to me?
Yeah. So I have a background in the nonprofit world on the orphan care side of things. So I became passionate about caring for families who had adopted and who were fostering children out of the foster care system. So this was years ago, and I ended up adopting some kids myself. And I became keenly aware of the fact that there were children who were emancipating out of the foster care system and never getting adopted. And that those kids were so vulnerable to a lot of different horrific things, but in particular, the tactics that a trafficker will use, and they'll prey upon these kids because they are kind of out in this world on their own. So that was my initial entry point into having a heart for this population and for wanting to do something. So fast forward, gosh, I'm not sure how many years later, got the opportunity to come on in 2019 to help replicate the TATS model in Canada. We launched in October of 2019 in Canada. And then, of course, COVID did its thing. And I went away for a couple of years and came back just this September as the Director of Industry Training. And so I get the opportunity and just really the honor to work with the trucking industry and related industries to help bring awareness to this help them see how their companies intersect with potential human trafficking and how they can get involved. And to date, we've trained over 1.7 million individuals on how to spot signs of human trafficking and how to report it as a part of their everyday job. So, so excited to be back with Truckers Against Trafficking.
So, baseline 101 question, what is human trafficking?
So the general definition of human trafficking is when a person is exploited through common tactics of force, fraud, and coercion for the purposes of either commercial sex or forced labor. Now, each country, Canada and the U.S., they kind of have their different laws, but that's a general definition. So when I say commercial sex, you can think of things like prostitution, stripping, pornography, brothels, and most typically pimps. Forced labor would be things like sweatshops, agricultural fields, workers basically not being paid for their work or being forced to work long hours for little to no pay. And there's always a third party who is driving all of this, profiting off of this exploitation. So a trafficker or a pimp, a victimizer who is in control and making a profit off of somebody else's work.
And I mean, this is probably a fairly common feeling, but I'm going to put it into words. And I know it's naive as I say it, but it's intentional. This doesn't feel like it happens here. Like when I don't see this, and it feels like this happens other places. Like what are, in Canada specifically, or the United States even for that matter, like what are the stats on this? Like how much is this occurring? I don't know how it's measured, but maybe you can help me a little bit.
Yeah, so it is happening in all 50 states, including DC, and it's happening in all of the provinces and territories. And those statistics are coming from the Canadian Centre to End Human Trafficking, who runs the Canadian Human Trafficking Hotline, and the U.S. nonprofit Polaris, who runs the U.S. hotline. So it is everywhere. It's in all of our backyards, and it's a big problem. The International Labor Organization reports that there are over 50 million people enslaved today, and they generate over $150 billion in profits for the traffickers each year. So it's a big global problem.
Holy cow! And so what are how do you know? What am I trying to say here? Like, what are the red flags? Like, how do you know this is occurring, or how can you identify as just a person?
So the two most obvious signs of human trafficking are, number one, if you see a minor who is selling commercial sex, that's automatically human trafficking right there. And the second obvious sign would be if there's any sign of pimp control. So traffickers will often drop their, and I'm going to say girls because the statistics show that it is mostly girls and women, although not exclusively. But traffickers will often drop their girls off at places in multiple numbers sometimes. And they'll stay on the premises and kind of oversee the process, and they may even get involved in the bartering. So if you are seeing signs of pimp control, that is definitely a big red flag. Other red flags that maybe if you're seeing one, might not be human trafficking, but if you're seeing two or three of these things, you definitely want to make a phone call. So does the victim know where she is? Oftentimes pimps will move their victims from place to place very quickly, kind of keep them off kilter and to make sure that they don't know where to go for help. Does she have any identification on her? Is she in control of her own money? Does she talk about making a quota? Or are there any signs of branding or tattoos on her that would indicate that she's the property of somebody else?
What happens? Like, how do you? Sorry, these questions are all going to become very naive. And again, I've just not had. We've never done a show like this before. What is the? How do you get out of this? And I don't mean like an escape. I'm thinking about like, do they age out? Like what happens? What's the sort of the what's generally the outcome here? And I'm assuming it's not great, but what happens?
Yeah, so the outcome is really dependent on, a lot of different factors, and I don't have stats on it. But let's talk about the things that keep the victims in these situations. So there are three main tactics or common tactics that traffickers will use to keep their victims compliant. So there's no chains or shackles that are actually needed because of how powerful these tactics are. So the first one is force. So force can look like anything, like a one-off beating, a brutal assault. Victims are raped, gang raped, forced into drug addiction. They're mutilated, tortured, they're knifed, and even shot. The second tactic is fraud. So this can be things like, well, anything that's a false offering. It could be a job in an exciting location, for example, maybe offering a modeling career. It could also be offerings of like love and acceptance or some sort of provision or safety as the dangling carrot. And so that fraud piece of it, that false offering draws people in, and then the dialogue is flipped and it becomes a bait and switch situation where they're forced into situations that they can't get themselves out of. So this can look like in a parental or familiar sense, being given a place of belonging in a family. It could also look like a boyfriend situation where a guy comes in and says, "Hey, we're going to live happily ever after, and we're always going to be together." Or even a group of friends who offers somebody who's had maybe a really horrific family situation. They're offering, acceptance, and you can trust me with anything, or you can come live with us. And so the dialogue then switches oftentimes within the case of fraud. So there's force and there's fraud, but by far the most powerful tactic that traffickers will use is coercion. And they use it either on its own or they use it in conjunction with force and fraud. So this includes things like physical threats, or shame and fear-inducing threats to a reputation. So this will be things like, if you don't comply, I'm going to kill you. Or if you ever want to see your child again, you'll do what I say. Or, just do this one more time and I won't share that video of us having sex with your high school. So these chains of force, fraud, and coercion they're invisible, but they are so, so powerful. So that is what can keep a victim in the life longer than, you would think that they would have to be there. Some people would ask, well, why don't they just leave? Well, there are things going on behind the scenes that you don't know about. And oftentimes these tactics can even make a person who's involved in commercial sex, who's being exploited by a trafficker, look like they're active participants in the process.
It's interesting because I kind of in my mind have this idea of more of a kidnapping style of how you might become part of this. And this is clearly, sort of psychological abuse that pulls you in. And to your point earlier, when you sort of started, it is taking vulnerable populations and sort of leveraging that vulnerability, I guess, into these situations. It's kind of, it's obvious when you say it, but it's a little bit different than I kind of pictured, I think.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad you brought up the concept of kidnapping, because that is a common misconception. And Polaris actually came out with a report of the victims, the survivors that they were able to report in 2021. 83% of them knew their traffickers. So, and that number represented 33% who were trafficked by parents or other family members. And 28% was intimate partners. So, this is happening in ways that people aren't necessarily seeing, in the Hollywood film set. It looks a little bit different than the kidnapping that we might expect.
How do you as a person do this and not cry your eyes out every single day?
Yeah, and I do have moments where I have to kind of regroup and allow myself to feel that this is a heavy problem.
Mm-hmm.
But I tell you that my sadness really kind of fuels my passion. And I love being able to get in front of audiences and tell the realities. Because I know that these trucking professionals, they have the power to make a difference. And if I can get in front of more companies and if more truckers are trained, we have a greater ability to increase the eyes and ears out on the road and ensure that more victims are recovered and that more pimps are arrested.
Yeah, I think it takes a special kind of person to be able to do this work, because I think it is in so many ways so much easier to. There are so many people that are so grateful for people like you who do this work, because the general feeling, I think, is this is terrible, this is really bad, but if I don't look at it, it's not there. And then so for people to kind of like step out and say, I'm going to take this on and I'm going to really take on the emotional intensity, what I think most would describe as almost burden in a way, to kind of to make a dent in this is that's big work. So I really want to sort of celebrate you for that, because I think that is just an incredible. I think it is so much easier to avoid at times, and so I think that's again amazing work. So I just want to kudos to you for doing this, and this is big stuff.
I appreciate you saying that, and I'm honored to be doing it. And I think there also is this concept that it's easier to turn a blind eye rather than get involved. And what TAT has done is made this lift pretty easy. Our training video is only 26 minutes long. That's our over the road training. It's a really well done documentary style video. And so in 26 minutes, a person can be trained. And the ask is simply make a phone call. So if somebody thinks that they're seeing something, we're making sure that they know that they don't need to at all get involved with the trafficker or try to be any kind of vigilante. Just pick up the phone and make a phone call. Yeah. And so the ask is really easy.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So because now my mind is changed on how this all comes to be, I'm really curious now about how this ties into trucking at all. So what is it that trucking has sort of purview into or access to from an information perspective that makes it unique or gives them an advantage to help here?
Yeah, well, if you think about the nature of truck driving and the extensive traveling and just being in places that they are, truck stops and parking lots, rest areas, gas stations, hotels and motels, places of business, and even in-home delivery drivers have the chance to see things too with those who are in commercial sex, in residential commercial sex. And so they are the eyes and ears out on the road, and they are intersecting just through the nature of their jobs alone. So what better way to help law enforcement than to utilize these good men and women who are trained to be vigilant in the course of their regular jobs, how to recognize and how to report.
And maybe this is just me being skeptical and listening to too much like hip hop growing up, but like, what is how well, and I know this probably is a depends answer, but how does law enforcement handle this in terms of, this feels like one of those areas to me where they would be less likely to aggressively pursue, in that maybe that's not going on. Maybe this is like something there. I don't, maybe I'll ask a question and wait for your answer. Like how effective do you feel is law enforcement when they're engaged in this?
I think that they can be very effective. And we actually, we have one team within Truckers Against Trafficking that solely is there to educate law enforcement and to engage them in a victim-centered approach. And so they have the opportunity as well to intersect with victims and to make a huge difference in that victim feeling safe enough to disclose or make the choice to get help and potentially recovered.
I guess I just think about like truck stops that have like it's pretty well known that prostitutes frequent truck stops, but like if I know that, and I've never even really been to one. No, I haven't been to one except for like to get gas like on the other side of it maybe, but like I don't see law enforcement there like actively, enforcing that type of thing. So I mean, and I don't know if they're kind of watching and if it seems like it's not human trafficking and it's more voluntary, then they're not that concerned about it because at the end of the day, maybe that isn't a huge deal. But I guess that's the line I'm trying to figure out. Like, I feel like they would have access to this now. They know the corners, the places, the places that would be sort of more high frequency in terms of prostitution. And I don't know this categorically. It just feels like that's not something that's heavily enforced, I guess.
Yeah, so I do want to answer that question, but first I'm going to back up. And the word prostitution is something that we at TAT, we don't use. We do talk about the prostituted person because we believe that more than likely there is a third party who's controlling this. And if there isn't, there's a good chance that this person just didn't have another choice in life. And therefore, we try to flip the way that we're looking at these mostly girls and women who are at the truck stops or engaged in commercial sex. But as it pertains to law enforcement, and the question that I think I'm hearing you asking is, why aren't they, spending more time at truck stops because this is happening there? Well, I don't know for certain, but my thought is if the cops were there, those traffickers would just be moving their girls somewhere else.
Fair enough.
And so that's why the trucking industry, truck drivers in particular, have an incredible opportunity to be those eyes for law enforcement, because oftentimes they're the ones who are being reached out to as the buyer. And so it's kind of a good way for them to really make a difference by making a phone call to law enforcement and then getting them out there when they think they're seeing something. So
yeah, I think that's a great call. And actually, do you have any I don't know what you can or can't share, but do you have any stories of maybe some situations where industry did step in and created a change or an impact?
Absolutely. I'd love to share. Excuse me. In January of 2015, an RV pulled into a truck stop, and then police were soon called onto the scene. And when they arrived, there were 3 people in that RV, and there was a young girl and a couple. And the police officer pulled the young girl out and questioned her. And after interviewing everybody involved, a horrific story made headlines. So 2 weeks prior, the 20-year-old Iowa woman in the RV had been lured from her home by a couple that her family knew. And then once that she was away from her home, she was beaten, raped, and burned all over her body with instruments that had been heated up on the RV stove. And she was being sold for sex by 2 individuals, and their names are Laura Sorensen and Aldair Hodza. Through sex ads on Craigslist, people, men in particular, would purchase her, and then they would show up at that truck stop to the RV and rape her for money. And she was dying from the malnutrition that she was experiencing, as well as the torture that she had been subjected to. And doctors actually said that had she not been brought to the hospital, that she would have died within the next few days. So while this was taking place, while the trafficking was taking place, the traffickers actually had her texting her family back in Iowa. So they thought that everything was okay, and they weren't even looking for her. Um, what they didn't count on is a trucker named Kevin Kimmel being at the same truck stop, who noticed some things that didn't look right. Number one, there was a man coming back and forth from the RV into the convenience store. And then there were multiple men coming to the RV at within short increments of time. But when he saw a young woman stick her head out of the window and have it violently snapped back in, and then a black curtain drawn, he knew that something wasn't right. And he went ahead and made a phone call to law enforcement that resulted in them coming out and separating the young woman, and her eventually getting back to her family in Iowa. Sorensen and Hodza are now serving 40 and 41 years in prison.
You can't
so truck drivers have a really, really, they can be everyday heroes just by taking a second look.
I just can't believe how sick some people are. It's just beyond my imagination that even two people could come together and be mutually this sick. And like, this is, that I will never get used to hearing these types of things. It just never gets like, it's such a raw thing to hear. And I mean, not to say I've even heard anything like that before at that level. I don't even know. That's unbearable. I have two daughters. I mean, it's just so hard to to process these types of things. This is just unbelievable. But I mean, I mean, good outcome, terrible experience, to get there. So how do people get involved, and how do people help, and what do you need from our listeners, from this community to make a further and more enduring impact?
Yeah, so we're looking to build partnerships with companies. Reach out to me is the message that I want to give you. Reach out to me. Assuming you're going to put my email up in the show notes.
Yeah, but you can say it now. Yeah.
Yeah. So my email is hfry. My last name is Fry, Fry, at truckersagainsttrafficking.org. And the way that we work is we look at each company on an individual basis, and we look at their company structure and their culture and how they intersect with the drivers. And then we come up with the plan of how to engage. And our first ask is always that they get their employees, and especially their drivers, trained through our 26-minute long video. We do also have, we have the over-the-road video, we have a local driver video, and we have movers and in-home delivery driver video as well. So depending on what type of driving these folks do, we've got a video that's geared towards that. It's an easy lift and a very well done, interesting video to watch. It's not a dry learning environment type video. So that's an easy fix. And then we'll also look at different ways that perhaps they can add, something to their safety culture other than just the training. So that may be something like looking at an anti-trafficking in persons policy to incorporate into the personnel manual. And what that does is it helps their employees know that they will not tolerate the purchasing of commercial sex on the company time or the company dime. Using any company resources. And because what we know is if there were no buyers of commercial sex, there would be no victim. There wouldn't be a need for it. So that also is, some of the awareness that we want to get out there. And companies are really jumping on board and they're rallying behind this movement because they're realizing that number one, it's a worthy cause. And number two, they have the ability to really make a difference.
Yeah, it feels like it is a very direct sort of throughput, it feels like, on the things you can do. And the thing that was sort of on my mind as you were saying that is I'm trying to think about sort of one level removed. And so I think about our freight broker listeners, and you are in an office or wherever that may be, and you're not on the street, but you engage with hundreds, if not thousands, of trucking companies on an annual basis. And there are certain things that you are making your trucking companies do in order to work with you for specific customers. And I'll tell you this, and I'll help you here a little bit, freight broker listeners. The ability to have certain accreditations or standing for certain causes can actually give you good commercial impact. So to say that you're a business that stands with this organization and that you mandate might be a strong word, but persistently insist that your carrier partners have done the work to be do they get certified, or what's the outcome here for this? Or
certified.
Okay,
That's right.
So you become certain. So if your carriers are certified, you can talk back to your customer base and say, this is something that we care about, this is something that matters, and we are certified in this category. That goes a long way on that side. And then on the other side, you're doing good work in raising awareness. And I think this is interesting because the freight brokers have this interesting application where they can be one to many. So it's that we're interacting with multiple carriers at one time. And I feel like there's a power there from a bit of a network effect. So just to throw that out there, this came to my mind as we were talking.
Yeah, that's very intuitive because that is how we work with our 3PLs and brokers. They're influencers. They've got a wide reach. And, you said mandate, but even if they just encourage, we'd for mandate to be on the list, but just encouraging and letting other companies know what you stand for is huge. Maybe within the RFP process, that's a question that's asked, do you currently train your drivers? And just as an awareness piece, they'll know which carriers do train. And that might also, on the other end of it, pique some interest and drive them to our website and get that company to train.
Yeah. So, and again, back to you brokers again, I hope you heard that, because the easiest thing in the world for a shipper to do is just simply put that on the RFP. It's a 3-second job, and now they've done their part. So it's probably coming. So get ahead of it and be a part of the solution, and don't be reactive to it. And again, just speaking commercially in a capitalistic way, it could be a competitive advantage at this point while making a difference. There is win-wins out there for things like this. So I think that's a super interesting initiative. I don't think it's hard to do, and I think the impact against effort there is pretty meaningful. So it seems like a worthy cause. So I'm kind of asking on our group to consider this. Check out the website. Connect with Heather. This sounds very, very, again, low work, high result. So please, if you have a sister, a mother, a daughter, you will feel why this matters. And so I think I encourage everybody to be a participant.
Yeah. And that, talking along the lines of, mother, daughter, that sort of thing, we also encourage folks, just anybody, take this message home to your dinner table and talk to the children in your lives about what the realities of human trafficking looks like.
Yeah.
Because it isn't just the kidnapping scenario. It's not this over sensationalized Hollywood picture. It is, these everyday, microaggressions of, it can look like one thing, but then it automatically or it unexpectedly turns into something else. So that dialogue is really good to open up within the context of your family as well, and the people that you know.
Yeah, I think one thing I want to maybe call attention to here is that we spoke a lot about the the vulnerable population, and that would be obviously a place of opportunity. But I don't think if you are you are not eliminated from the possibility of this if you are middle class white people. Like this happens to everybody, I would imagine, and because this sounds like I'm just going to use like an abusive boyfriend happens in every walk of life, whatever your gender might be, whatever your, so not gender, but whatever your race might be, whatever your socioeconomic profile might be, that happens everywhere. And so this is really in many ways feels like that's I'm not suggesting that that the boyfriends are going to be traffickers, but I don't know that this precludes you from being victimized based on where you sit socially, economically, where you live. This sounds like it's a problem up and down the socioeconomic ladder. Is that fair?
Absolutely. It 100% goes across the board. And if you think about just, broken homes or dysfunctional homes, those happen across the board too. So those populations, a teenager who's experiencing some really tough times, even in a white upper middle class place. They may fall prey to a trafficker, a good looking guy who comes in and says, all the right things, when the family that they're sitting in is a little bit tough to be in. It can happen. It just can happen.
So, I mean, I have to ask, how do, and maybe it'll be very specific because I'm being selfish here. Like, how as parents can you identify something like this happening before it happens?
Yeah, I think being a parent myself, I think it's just really important to keep the lines of communication open. And if you see that your teenager or even younger, if you see them kind of being distant or spending a lot of time using online social media platforms, knowing their passwords, talking to them in non-off-putting ways about what they're doing online.
That's so hard. That's so hard to do.
So hard. I know. Believe me, I get that. But the best we can do, and we're never going to be perfect as parents, but we just try the best that we can to love our kids well and to just be vigilant in knowing what's going on in their lives as best we can.
Yeah.
So, a home where a child feels loved and accepted is going to be a safe home where they may not be as vulnerable to the tactics of a trafficker.
Right. Good advice. Okay, Heather, thank you. That was really informative. It's really sad for me personally just to hear these stories, and I just wish these things weren't true, but they are. And so thank you for doing the work that you do to raise the awareness and be on the front lines of this and just endure the there would be trauma for you on this, and you're taking that on. So I really, really appreciate you for this and appreciate the work, and we will do the best that we can to support you in your efforts. And I encourage all listeners to do the same thing for Heather and for the Truckers Against Trafficking. And so let's do something here. I think we can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me on.
Okay. Thank you for being here. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye. And thank you for listening. And please don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this show or others. And check back in a couple weeks for our next episode.